Hi, it's Lee from ColouringQueen.net, and today I thought we would talk about something that most homes have, which is a packet of crayons. So we probably remember these from when we were a kid or our own kids. And if we're just starting out in colouring, or maybe you want to try something different, we can use crayons to colour with. Now when they go straight on, they tend not to blend as well, but I'm going to give you some tips on how you can blend them to get a smoother finish. I'm using a free mandala download that I got from Tiger Links from the Facebook page there. She's got a lot of things that she gives away, so we can see that it's a little bit scratchy and a little bit showing the tooth of the paper, and it's not really very smooth. And I'm going to show you how to blend it so you get a nice smooth finish on there. And just like everything else, our crayons need sharpening. So I use my Staedtler sharpener, and just make sure you keep them sharp. Might need to take the paper off, and I put it in the big hole and just make sure I get a little bit off there just to keep it sharp. Now, because these are wax based, it'll blunt the lead. You'll get a waxy build up on your blade. So run a lead pencil through it from time to time just to clean off that wax off the blade. You will get a bit of wax dust from time to time when you're colouring, just like you might get the wax bloom if you're using Prismacolor or other wax-based pencils. Just blow it off or dust it off, and then you can progress through. So you can see by sharpening and just applying that extra pressure, you can sort of burnish with the crayon. So it's a lot more smoother than these other areas, but I'll show you how to smooth those out soon. Now, crayons are great if you just you don't want to sort of really take up colouring as like a full-time thing, just like every now and again you want to, sit down and just have a bit of a colour and, enjoy yourself. They're also great if you're on a budget because, most packs of crayons can be bought really cheap. I've actually got quite a few packets of crayons because I bought them after the back-to-school sales. The shops always tend to order too much stuff, so I usually go when they put things on special and I buy after the back to school thing had finished. The other thing that crayons are great for, not just budget-wise or occasional colourists, but they're also great because they're so soft. They're great if you have any sort of hand injuries. So I have an injury to my right wrist. Colouring can sometimes be incredibly painful for me, but with crayons, because they're so soft and waxy, they just go on super smooth. So I tend not to get that pain in my wrist. A lot of people, if you have arthritis, you might find that really painful if it's in your hands to colour. So this can just make it easier. Now, one of the drawbacks is, of course, that crayons don't really get to the fine point of pencils, and because they get this really large build-up of wax, you're never going to be able to get into really, really tiny places. So it's really better suitable for larger spaced things like this mandala, or larger spaced images or quotes, things like that, where you don't have to have such a fine point that you might need with pencils. The harder you press, you're sort of burnishing it and you're pushing down the tooth on the paper. Now, I used watercolour paper because it does have more tooth to it. The reason that I don't like to use photocopy paper that much is I'm a bit heavy-handed. I might actually push through the paper because I'm a bit rough with things. And you can see that because I'm pushing a little bit harder now, sort of burnishing the paper and it's sort of flattening the tooth down on the paper, which is another reason why photocopy paper is, not the best idea, because it doesn't have any tooth to start with, so everything just sort of glides across it. Applying deeper pressure on your next layer of colour. But of course there's more that we can do as well to give it that professional smoother finish. So I'm just going to add a little bit more colour to this. And you can still see that there's like little bits of white. That's the tooth of the paper. And so as I press further down, I'm trying to flatten that tooth down. Now, with the crayons, you can't build up a lot of layers because the wax stops you from doing that. And you might be able to notice that I'm getting quite a lot of little wax bits further I apply more wax to this. You can see how bright the crayons are. I've only got 24, but kind of wishing I had a few more now. So I'll just go through and I'll add some more. So there's a number of things that we can do now to blend this in more. If we add more layers to it, it's just going to be like a little wax ball because the wax just sits on top of each other and once it's pushed down into the tooth of the paper. So we can use a white crayon just like we would normally use a white pencil. And you can see all I'm doing is pressing a little bit firmer than what I'd previously done, and I'm just really basically trying to push down the tooth on the paper and cover up the little white bits of tooth on the paper that are coming through. Now the problem with a white crayon or white pencil for that matter is if you actually push too hard, which because of the wax content of the crayon you sort of need to, then you're really just tinting the colour, so you're taking away some of the vibrancy of the colour, and so you'd either have to add more, and often once you've already burnished it, so pushed down on it, you can't really add more colour often with pencils, etc. So you'd have to come back in to get that same sort of vibrancy again if you use the white crayon to push it down. To you, whether you want to use the white crayon, it comes in the 24 set box, so that's your cheapest option. Your next option available is just to use some good old baby oil. So I just got a home brand of baby oil, and I've got a bit of old plastic packaging from something that I'll just pour a little bit into. Get some of those Q-tips or earbuds as I call them, and just dampen out the earbud. You don't want too much oil on there, so it just needs to be sort of coated but not sopping wet. And then we just come in and we go over the top of it and just smooth on over, gently pushing to push that colour into the paper and smooth it out and smooth through all those lines that we've made when we've been colouring it in. So we get a nice finish that way, and it's all nicely blended in. So just move it out of the sunlight so that you can see that it's blended in. Your tip will go the colour of the paper, so make sure that you've got a few Q-tips for different colours. So we'll just try it with the green. So the cheapest option is just use that white crayon. Your second cheapest option is some no-name cheap baby oil. Now you do get a little bit of a film on here if you put too much on at once, but it does go away, so it's just at the time that you're putting it on. So we can see that we've got our green there. I don't know whether you can see this on film, but in real life it looks as smooth and totally vibrant. So we've got our white pencil option, our baby oil, and then the final option is Gamsol, which is an artist's oil solution. I bought this from the art shop. You can buy it on Amazon. I don't need a lot. Again, it's like the baby oil. You only need a little tiny bit. So I'm just going to dip my cotton bud in there. And we'll go over to this side of the paper and we'll use the Gamsol. So just gently rubbing it in. And smoothing down all of that wax and blending all those colours together. So that one does cost a little bit more, probably about $6 or something like that. Depends on your budget and what else you'll use it for. You can use the oil and the pencils also, the oil and the Gamsol also for blending pencils. And a little bit does go a long way. This is still the same cotton bud that I used on that first one over there. But I do think, you know, the baby oil has a better vibrancy with some of the colours, like the Gamsol is taking out some of the colour on the purple. So theoretically you can colour up all these things just with the stuff that you might have already laying around the house, and you know, pretty cheaply without having to buy some additional art supplies. Of course you can always buy those things, but you know, if you're just new to colouring, you might want to just experiment and see if it's for you before you dive in and spend a lot of money on things. So this is just the baby oil that I'm coming in here with, and just sort of smoothing it over. I've turned the cotton bud around so that the dark side is not touching this lighter side, because I don't want to get the purple in with the yellow and transfer it. But a little tiny dab goes a long way. Anywhere where you see a little bit of the white tooth still poking through, or the colours are looking a bit scratchy, just go over it with your cotton bud. So if you put too much on, it'll just pool on the surface like it's done there. If you put too much on, just try and, you know, wipe it up a bit so it doesn't just pool on the top there and form a film. You can also add more colour after you've already put the blending solution on, so you can just go straight over it and just pop more colour in if you want, and go down a little bit smoother because you've already put that blending solution on there. So if you wanted to come back in and add a pop more, you can just do that going straight over. This hasn't had any time to dry, so it's still a little bit damp from the blending solution. And by the way, that's why I use the watercolour paper to start with, because I knew I was going to put a wet resource or medium on there, being the baby oil and whatnot. I want something that would absorb it. So just going back in and adding some more colour, and you can add more baby oil if you wish to blend it out further, or the Gamsol, or even the white pencil or the white crayon if you wanted to. So you can always come back and add extra. When you are brushing it off though, just when you've already added the oil, it's not dry, so it'll probably stick to your fingers a little bit, so just wait for it to dry, especially if you added a little bit too much and you formed like a film of oil there. But you can see how now that we've got this smooth finish on there from the baby oil, that it's easier to pop the colour on top. And say I think that's starting to bring up some little wax bits and pieces, the little wax dust, so I'll just smooth them, making sure I don't rub in any wax dust that I've blown that off and removed it. Another tip I wanted to give you before we go is that you can always put the baby oil down first. So I've already coloured this image in, so I don't have anything here left to put it down. So I'll just lay down some baby oil on here, just running over it onto the paper with my little cotton bud. Okay, you can see it shining in the light. And then obviously you would do that in between the pattern. And then you just come over it with your crayon and see how that's going on a lot smoother than previously. It's looking a lot smoother and lots more pigment than in our initial lay down of colour. So you can do that as well. And if you've got enough baby oil on there, you can add your second colour and just blend it in. But make sure you use, a good paper for wet mediums. Although the paper won't get soaked or anything, it's important to get that finish. And instead of using the cotton bud, you can also use a blending stump. These are made from paper. You buy them at art shops, but I actually got mine just at the discount shop where I get most of my cheaper art supplies. And for like a packet of 10, they were like $1.50. So what you do is you dip it into your baby oil or your Gamsol, and because it's got the little point on there, it just gives you a better touch, and then just, rub it in just like normal, little small circles, and you don't get any little bits of hair off the cotton bud or anything that way. And what you do with these is that when the end gets a bit dirty or blunt or whatnot, you just sharpen it. So it really gives it a far smoother finish than the cotton bud. So what you can do if you don't want to use cotton buds is you can purchase some blending stumps. These are made from paper without leaving any little bits of fluff from the cotton bud on your paper or any sort of residue. And it gives you a lot more control, especially up near these outline bits. You can really push it down. This would be the way to go if you were doing a lot. You just pull out your handy pencil sharpener, and because it's made of paper, it'll sharpen right off. They come in different sizes, so you might need a different size pencil sharpener. Try it in the bigger one. And you're just shaving the paper off, basically, getting down to a finer point. And then we can reuse that. So depending on your sharpener, make sure you've got one for each size. My sharpener needs cleaning because it's filled with crayon at the moment. So I'm going to run a lead pencil through that and clean it up. But there, once you've got that little point back again, you can dip it back into your oil and go again. Another thing that you can do with your crayons. Until next time, happy colouring!